Garbage Pail Kids is a new NES game for your actual NES or for your modern video game systems.
Eight-bit joystick.
If you didn't know better, it would be a very reasonable assumption that Garbage Pail Kids' Mad Mike: The Quest for Stale Gum is a long-lost, recently rediscovered NES game, because that's exactly what it looks like. But in fact, in all truthfulness, it is a newly developed NES game that just came out in the distant year of 2022 and 2023. For those of you who have not heard, the Garbage Pail Kids was a series of well-beloved sticker trading cards that were published by the Topps Card Company, and they were originally created by award-winning graphic novelist and cartoonist Art Spiegelman of Mouse fame. The initial press run was from 1985 to 1988, and they sold over 1 billion cards. The name itself is a parody of the very popular Cabbage Patch Kids from the 1980s. The Cabbage Patch Kids themselves were owned by the Coleco Company, the same company behind the ColecoVision. They sued Topps over Garbage Pail Kids, but settled out of court. Unlike the Cabbage Patch Kids that featured wholesome, adorable dolls, the Garbage Pail Kids featured doll-like characters in various states of grotesque, gross-out bodily fluid humor, occasionally horrific body horror, scatological grossness, cartoon violence, death, drugs, alcohol, and destruction, and everything that immature kids in the 1980s would find absolutely awesome. These sticker cards would be packaged with a stick of stale gum, and they would definitely appeal to the kids who are not into these sports-related trading cards. I remember them from the 1980s, and I thought that they were absolutely awesome. What I loved about Garbage Pail Kids is that they did not talk down to their audience. Yes, they are gross, yes, it is juvenile, but it is also parody-rich art. They are a sarcastic look at pop culture, and as a kid, I got the joke, and I thought they were awesome. They were actually released in Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Spain, Israel, Latin America, Brazil, Italy, France, Belgium, and Germany, as well as North America. At the height of their popularity, they were banned by many schools for being inappropriate for kids, and in 1988, the Mexican government actually banned the importation of violent media marketed towards kids, and the Garbage Pail Kids sticker series was the inspiration for such a law. As the generation of kids that grew up in the 1980s grew up into rather not exactly well-adjusted adults, we can now appreciate the Garbage Pail Kids for the satirical artwork that they are. So, Garbage Pail Kids were a big hit and a big deal, so it would make perfect sense for there to be an NES game. Despite their height of their popularity happened to coincide with the dominance of the NES. However, none was made at that time. Luckily, the good folks at Retrotainment set out to correct that horrible injustice against 1980s awesomeness. Garbage Pail Kids, Mad Mike and the Quest for Stale Gum is a side-scrolling action platform game featuring a cast of 4 playable Garbage Pail Kid characters, each one with their own strengths and abilities. You can swap between them in real time, and they all have their own health meters. There actually are some different strategies to different characters. Some are better at close quarter combat, and some have snot and vomit-based projectile attacks. There are 6 different worlds, each with their own characters and different levels. There is a prehistoric dinosaur-themed level which ends with a fight against a big dinosaur skeleton. A 1980s Japan level which features a really cool synthwave and city pop inspired Tokyo imagery, and actually features a real-world depiction of the Tsukuji fish market and the late great Nakagin capsule building. There's an ancient Egyptian trek through the desert and various pyramids, a horror-themed Transylvania level featuring parodies of classic monsters, a sci-fi setting on Mars with aliens, and there's straight up hell. like no beating around the bush, actual Christian hell filled with demons and such. The artwork and graphics are actually really good and are very technically impressive for an NES game, let alone independently made modern NES games. The music is also quite good and takes advantage of NES hardware, and the controls are excellent. Every time that I died, I blamed myself because the character controlled just how I wanted it to. The challenge is actually pretty tough, but that's good for a replay value. But if you want to cruise through the game, you can turn down the difficulty level and see what the game has to offer. There is a ton of branching paths and exploration to find hidden garbage cans filled with cards, and you can find Garbage Pail Kid characters that you can actually trade cards with. These cards can actually be used as power-ups, with some of them allowing you to fly or to heal your characters. And some of them are just awesome looking cards, and they're based on legit Garbage Pail Kid designs. The main version of the game was developed for NES by Retrotainment, and it is still available on cartridge for NES, either with a limited edition blue cartridge or a pink cartridge from I Am 8bit for $80. But there's an updated digital edition for modern game systems done in part by the retro game porting folks at Digital Eclipse, and published by I Am 8bit for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One Series, and PC on Steam and Epic Game Store for just $10. The good folks at I Am 8bit sent me a review code for the PlayStation version, but they had no input in this review. They actually had all the retro video game options that I'd want in a modern version. There are save states, and there's a rewind function, and 80s themes border, and graphic display options. I liked the pretty good TV scan lines, and I thought that the monitor setting was a little weird because it featured vertical scan lines instead of horizontal scan lines. The digital version also has high-resolution scans of the manual and artwork used to create the game, and they had an animated video parody of Mad Max featuring the Garbage Pail Kids, and a video about a Garbage Pail Kids game that sort of gives you the impression that this was an old game that came out in the past instead of being a modern production. I actually really like the side-by-side comparisons of the real Garbage Pail Kids cards and their 8-bit depictions in the game. Despite the game developers setting out to make a late 1980s appropriate NES game based on a sarcastic but beloved 1980s media property, I'm actually glad that it is modern because they did a much better job than many game developers would have done with this media license back in the actual 1980s. Retrotainment made a legitimately fun game, and I can't imagine what a Garbage Pail Kids NES game would have looked like in the hands of, say, LGN. This game is a real labor of love, and you get that sense from every moment of playing it. Honestly, I'm glad that it came out now because Nintendo had control over publishing games on the NES back in the day, and they did not allow for some gross out and violence. Hypothetically, I could have seen a Garbage Pail Kids themed game on being heavily censored by Nintendo back in the day. However, nowadays, we can totally handle it, and it might have been too much for Nintendo in the late 1980s at the time, but nowadays you can play it on your NES and modern game systems, and including the Nintendo Switch. So, in a way, it actually did get a legitimate Nintendo release on a legitimate Nintendo platform. Just, it was on the Nintendo Switch, and not the NES. Garbage Pail Kids, Mad Mike's The Quest for Stale Gum is good. It can stand up to licensed platform games made by any game developer that you could think of on the NES. It is absolutely worth your $10, and I wholeheartedly endorse that you get it on any modern platform that you desire. My kitty Guy here wanted to let you know that we make awesome videos like this each week. So make sure that you are subscribed to this here YouTube channel for your future retro video game YouTubins. And if you like awesome independent modern games being made for the NES, then check out my review of Project Blue right here. This is 8-bit Joystick. Stay awesome. Play retro.